fishing actually started as a derivative of strong wind Polaroiding. You know, up until about the 1970s, nobody did anything more with Polaroid glasses and fish off a high bank of a river or a high bank of a lake or even a cliff top. But you'll see in a Fly Fisher in Tasmania, written by David Scholes, a very good photograph of guys Polaroiding dead calm water. But it was my mate John Philbrick that actually I think is the father of modern day Polaroiding, when he discovered at Penstock Lagoon in the early 70s that in a strong northerly you could find fish in the waves. And I remember him saying, "Come on Jim, you've really got to go and have a look at this." And he took me on my first high wind Polaroiding experience. And in those days no one went out to the Western Lakes on a sunny day when there was a 30 knot northerly blowing, and today that's the best day you can go out to the Western Lakes. So with the knowledge of being able to Polaroid in the winds, I remember Peter Wilson, who was the original publican at the Great Lake Hotel, which is now the Central Highlands Lodge, and he said, "Oh, you ought to see the fish in the waves at 6 o'clock in the evening near the wall on the Great Lake." And that became the beginning of shark fishing. Firstly, we fished late afternoon when the fish glowed in the waves, and nowadays we're looking for a blue sky and a northerly on the Great Lake every opportunity we can get. And today we've refined it to the patterns that we use. We all use beetle patterns, and we zigzag up and down across the waves every blue sky day we can get. And that was the origins of shark fishing. The technique of shark fishing for me is to zigzag the waves, work on to try and parallel your boat across the waves, looking into the waves with the sun behind you. So before lunchtime you probably want an easterly, and then after lunchtime you want a westerly. But the best wind basically is a northerly with a touch of west in it, because then you get the whole afternoon, and of course the beetles get onto the Great Lake through the afternoon, and of course the best fishing is when the beetles hit the water. So quite often you'll go in the morning and see no fish until 2 or 3 o'clock, and then between 3 and 5 or even 6 o'clock you'll see every fish up in the waves. And it is the most exciting sight fishing in the world, and I think Tasmania has a priceless fishery in shark fishing, and we nickname it shark fishing because the brown trout in the waves look like little olive brown sharks. In fact, sometimes they're absolute golden sharks, and the rainbows are sort of slate grey and much harder to see and much harder to catch as well. But when shark fishing is at its peak in January and February, there's no better fishing in the world. I use today the foam beetles tied by Bruce Gibson in the north of the state, and I don't think there's a better pattern. And when we're prospecting along the shores of the Great Lake, before we shark fish, i.e. we fish in 7 or 8 foot of water, I might use a Chernobyl ant or one of Julian's dunny brushes, and behind that put one of the gum beetles. But when the fishing is at its best and when the fish are up in the waves, a single fly and just Bruce Gibson's gum beetle is without doubt far and away the best fly that I've used. I do know guys that use hairwing coachmans or royal wolves to great effect, and fishing with Michael Yule the other day, he had a carrot fly on because he can see it, and he's now 80 years of age and the grandfather of fly fishing in Australia, because his dear old great-grandfather brought trout to Australia, and he was fishing with a carrot fly, and you could see it stood out like a traffic light. And so when you get a bit older and your sight's not so good, you've got to have a fly that you can see. But I use the gum beetle. It's my number one fly today. Now, it seems strange that I should say that when I'm probably known in fishing circles as being the great exponent of the red tag. Well, sadly, the red tag's at the back of my fly box, and the Bruce Gibson gum beetle's at the front of my fly box in this day and age. Fishing tackle's hard because each caster has a different view about what he wants in a fly rod. I like a rod that can handle at least 1 or even 2 fly line weights heavier than the rod. So I use an 8 line, and I use a scientific angler shark skin and in an 8 weight on a Winston 6 weight rod. Lots of guys just go up 1 rather than 2. I remember reading an American article on fly lines and what we should do, and the comment was, if you've been fly fishing for 10 years you should go 1 weight up on the rod. If you've been fly fishing for 25 years you should go 2 weights up on the rod, and if you're a brand new fisherman you should start with a 6 weight on a 6 weight rod. I don't know whether that's right or wrong. I think if you're a good caster and you've got the ability to handle line speed, double haul, comfortably and accurately, then you should go up a couple of weights. I like a medium action rod. I don't like the super fast action rods, but my young mate Timmy Wallace wouldn't have anything else but a fast action rod. So I don't think there's a black and white answer as to what tackle to use. The secret, of course, is presentation, to get in front of the fish. And sometimes with a moving boat, particularly in a 15 or 20 knot wind, it's a bit hard to get accurately in front of the fish. So the better the caster you are, the better the fisherman you are. And once you know where to go on the Great Lake, and really where to go has all to do with blue skies. You try and find a blue sky, and sometimes at the top of the lake you've got cloud rolling in over the northwestern tiers, and you're better down the south end of the lake. Other times it's vice versa. Boating in Tasmania, of course, has changed dramatically over the last 20 years. I remember the first barramundi punts that came in. The Savage Jabiru was my first one back in the 1970s, and then today the Hornet reigns supreme as a fly fishing platform, and even today there's some double hulled boats and treble hulled boats getting out into the Great Lake to handle the bigger seas, because sometimes the northerlies get up over 30 knots and you'd like to think you've got a safety factor as well. I use a Hornet, a 435. I love it. I've got on the back of it a Honda. It's the quietest motor. I can cross the waves at about 2 miles an hour just in idle, and it's just a perfect speed to eye off each wave looking for trout. So I zigzag across the waves. The 4-stroke motor has revolutionised shark fishing because you can go so quietly and so slowly across the waves, and they have huge advantages over the 2-stroke motor. And of course there's the economy factor as well. At the end of the day you've used a whole lot of litres less in a day's travelling across the waves than you would with a 2-stroke. Even the modern day 2-strokes I don't think work as well crossing the waves quietly as a 4-stroke. So I'm a 4-stroke nut, mine's a Honda. I couldn't ask for a better motor, and I'm totally biased and don't even listen to anyone who thinks that they've got some other motor that's better. To me it's black and white, it's the ideal boat, and everybody who gets on my boat at the end of the day says, I can't believe how good that motor is, I didn't hear it all day. It's a magic motor, so I'm a Honda.